kicking off the list at number 10. Vampire King. If there's one thing we need, it's more Vampire Hulk. I mean, right? That's what you were just thinking of. Also, scariest thing you can imagine, easily. He made his first debut in Ultimate Comics Avengers issue 3, and at first he was actually Nerd Hulk, which we see in the MCU right now. God, I hope he doesn't turn into a vampire. Or maybe I do, I don't know. Now, he was a clone of the Hulk that Captain America could take down, so he was smart, but he couldn't win a physical fight. So the Avengers kinda kicked him out. They're like, great, you're smart, but you can't punch, so beat it, pal. Rude. But that's when the next version of Nerd Hulk came to be. He was bitten by a vampire and took over an entire vampire horde. Now, the solution to a vampire Hulk was easier than we might have thought. Just teleport him into sunlight. And that's exactly what happened in Ultimate Avengers 18. We definitely need this guy to come back, especially now, post-COVID. He'd make a mark. Number 9, the Magician. A magician, the Magician. Who is he? The first Ultimate X-Men character that doesn't actually have a counterpart. So the Magician is OG in the Ultimates. Meet Elliot Boggs. He made his grand entrance in Ultimate X-Men issue 66, created by Robert Kirkman and Tom Rainey. Now, he was always dedicated to protect humanity, which is a great thing in a superhero. We want that. But when his powers came to be, the police thought that Elliot was the cause of his parents' death. Rightfully so. I mean, this guy can warp reality, but he can't even control it. So you don't really want to be around him, but you kind of want to be around him. He was able to create people, which is a pretty amazing ability. Dangerous, but amazing. So he worked with the X-Men for a bit, and then he worked with the Academy of Tomorrow for a bit, and then Nick Fury secretly talked to Xavier in hopes to get the Magician into S.H.I.E.L.D. custody. Now, the team attacked Elliot after some drama. They thought he was a threat, so he just created more villains. He just created more instances of Multiple Man, Blob, and Toad from the Brotherhood to attack. And Wolverine finished the kid off with his claws to the chestal plate, and it turns out that was just a manifestation, and Elliot was actually still alive. He just needs to disappear to work on his power. Fair. Where are you now? Is it good? Come back. I don't know. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be awesome. It's really helpful for our channel. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for your constant support. Let's get right back into this list. Number 8, a Teen Mutant. This next one is a one-off. He doesn't have a name, so we're just going to refer to him as Teen Mutant for now. He doesn't last too long. Now, at first, he looks like a regular kid. There's posters on his wall. He's got Wolverine on his wall, which is cool. He reminds me of me a little bit, you know. And the caption says, be different. So he took that advice maybe a little bit too far. So he wakes up, he's ready for school, he's looking for breakfast, and his mother is just nowhere to be seen. Only a pile of her clothes remains on the ground. So he calls the cops. Just kidding, he didn't do that. He just went to school after leaving a note. Don't do this, kids. Don't do that at all. On the way there, he sees a collar on the ground, again by itself, just clothing laid on the sidewalk. What's going on? Now, finally, he sees people, so he's not going crazy, which is a relief, but I bet he wishes that he was crazy, because he had this neat ability where people just don't survive being close to him. He hears it from the guy in the poster, Wolverine himself, when he finds him ducking out in a cave. So what happened was, when he hit puberty, this teen, he developed a specific mutation that radiates a series of toxins and acid-like poisons, which wipes out any organic tissue and just turns it into vapor, turns it into mist. The number of the day that he ended up taking out just because he hit puberty was 265. And I thought pimples were bad. Number 7, Silver Searcher. So the name is a little different for Norrin Radd in the Ultimates. He made his first debut in Ultimate Fantastic Four issue 42. He was teleported to Earth after Reed Richards mistook him for a star that he wanted to harness. So he brought him here. Awesome. It wasn't his fault. So naturally the world was also in chaos because of his arrival. But Norrin said that he would summon his master who would make the population of Earth happier than they've ever been. Fresh water for all, free phone plans, taxing the rich. What is this plan, sir? The Searcher's master was Zenla's ruler at the time. Revka Termaloon Edifax Skyros III. Rolls off the tongue nice and easy. Cool. Also known as the king without enemies. Let's just go with that. So this king would use mind control. That's the trick here, to get mind control and get these humans to worship them. So after Psycho Man took over the Earth, Silver Searcher rescued Mr. Fantastic and asked him to save the planet. Now the Searcher helped the Fantastic Four afterwards and then continued wandering the depths of space. Now we'd love to see a betrayal, especially when it's for the good side, you know? Norrin is great, and in the Ultimates, he is immortal, and he's powerful enough to go against the Phoenix, so yeah, we need more of him. Number 6, Loki. Making his first appearance in the Ultimates 2 issue 1, Loki Odinson was much more powerful here. He has the ability to shuffle time and space, as Thor simply puts it. In the beginning, Loki would fight alongside Thor and Balder. They were the Warriors 3. Now his mother was a prisoner of Odin and asked him to bring her the Norn stones, but while he was stealing them, he took out his brother Balder and of course was banished to Asgard afterwards. Now Loki can literally warp reality in the Ultimates. He can retcon history into anything he wanted to. He could create these events that just never happened, until he was depowered by Odin, of course. Now even after he was depowered, he was still able to put up quite a fight as our normal Loki. Now I want to see more Warriors 3 with them. Like, I would watch a show with just those three any day. It's probably gonna come, realistically, at this rate that Marvel's going at. Number 5, Juggernaut. The first time we see him, it's very clear that he's more powerful. Something is up with this X-Men. He looked like a future version of the Juggernaut. It was pretty intimidating. Now he looks like an evil stripper from the future, which is, honestly, I like it. It's cool. He was a genius in this universe as well. I mean, literally, the guy was super smart. He grew up in the same trailer park as Rogue, and he still considered himself trailer trash, although he was one of the smartest people alive. Guys, never doubt yourself. Things took a turn when he was taken by Weapon X and forced to be this living weapon of mass destruction. Then following the orders of Colonel John Wraith, he was part of their strike force that took out the X-Men, or even worse, forced the X-Men into Weapon X, which we heard plenty of early on in this list. He walked tall and mighty until he got taken out in the dumbest way possible. Like the Juggernaut, this makes me upset. He for sure needs a redemption, that's all I'm saying. Even when he's fighting Rogue later on, he still wants them to be happy and in love. He still wants that dream, so he's still a good guy deep down. And then Ultimate X-Men issue 99, in the middle of a fight, he gets taken down because of a poisonous dart. A dart. Yeah, just one of those. That's it. The Juggernaut got taken out by a dart. It went right through his visor gap. I mean, amazing aim, but come on. This is the same guy that dropped a building on Gambit? Number 4, Mr. Fantastic. Reed Richards needs a redemption on screen before anything else. I mean, the last Fantastic Four movie, I mean, if you haven't watched it, honestly, don't. Marvel's redoing them soon. You might as well just wait it out. In the Ultimate version, it was dark, and he was younger, and honestly, he was cooler. He made his first appearance in Ultimate Fantastic Four issue 1, and even at the start of Ultimatum, when that big wave hit, Sue bites the bullet, and he didn't waste any time. He's not happy. He immediately blames Namor, and by blaming, I mean he knocks him out first and then asks questions later. Okay, Reed, chill. Eventually, he becomes a villain in this universe, referring to himself as the Maker, and caused some trouble in the 616 universe as well, after his universe was destroyed. Now, this is the Mr. Fantastic that we need. This guy gets the job done. He's scary. Number 3, Wolverine. Making his first appearance in Ultimate X-Men issue 1, he didn't remember his past, and he thinks that he was once married. He has a ring, and he thinks Sabretooth killed his family. It's all a blur. Stressful. No thanks to Weapon X. Now, Ultimate James Howlett is actually the first mutant, and it turns out that this time around, you can kill Wolverine. You just have to rip his bones out that happen to have adamantium built into it. That ought to do it. Also, so painful. This all takes place during the Fatal Attractions event, and Wolverine doesn't even have a chance to scream. The adamantium that bonded to his bones erupted outward like water bursting through a dam. There's a nice picture for you. And he's still breathing when this happens. I mean, if this isn't one of the worst things to go through, I don't know what is. Number 2, Thor. Making his first entry in the Ultimates with issue 4, Thor Odinson actually looks a lot like our current MCU Thor, and I think he might have more in common than we think. For starters, the Ultimate Thor needs a magic belt to have powers, and in Spider-Man Homecoming, Happy mentions Thor's magic belt and all the stuff that they're packing up on Moving Day. So Thor just might need this come Love and Thunder, but in the comics, Loki was convincing everybody that Thor is just an insane dude with a magic belt. And they kind of bought it. What happens was he wasn't worthy yet, so he got his ass kicked, and then finally in Ultimates 2, issue 12, he gets his powers back. But the fact that this Thor went through all that to begin with, so sad. Definitely so sad. Number 1, Quicksilver. Okay, yeah, he's in love with his sister in the Ultimates, and it's weird, and it's gross. Yeah, sure. But this Quicksilver otherwise was far more superior. He was faster in the Ultimate Universe, he was supersonic when it comes to speeds. He almost reached the speed of light at one point, like, come on, dude. And as long as he's still alive, he can always re-heal himself. In Ultimate Wolverine issue 3, Pietro grabs Logan and runs with him. He was actually trying to tear the flesh off him, and if it was anybody else but Wolverine, it probably would have worked. And in Ultimate Comics 29, he heals himself using his super fast metabolism, and he uses his super speed to study Reed Richards' notes. He says he's not smart, but he is fast, so he ran the math nearly 100,000 times. That's insane. Quicksilver needs a comeback for sure, more so on screen than I think any superhero right now. Hashtag Ralph Boner. Number 10, Hawkeye. Ultimate Hawkeye first appeared in Ultimate issue 7, and he doesn't mind going for the kill this time around. He was a SHIELD agent who wasn't as fancy when it came to arrows, He's just more military this time around. It's actually pretty dark at times. He became a super soldier once briefly when the Avengers were put on the USS Jimmy Carter. They got captured, and then Hawkeye and a few others ingested super soldier serum, and then they rescued Nick Fury. Hawkeye is a pretty sweet agent. He's badass, he gets it done. But his family life and dynamic with Black Widow this time around is much different than most would think. When a team of mercenaries broke into Clint's house early on, they took out his wife and kids, which is awful. But it gets even worse when you find out that Black Widow was the leader of said mercenary team. And then Hawkeye gets even in a pretty gruesome way. 3 arrows, perfectly placed. Gory. Pretty gory, very gory. Number 9, Nick Fury. When he entered the Ultimates and Marvel Team Up issue 5, Nick Fury would soon take over as director of S.H.I.E.L.D. And his first plan was to bring back the Super Soldier program, which actually resulted in the creation of Ultimate Captain America and Ultimate Hulk, etc. His origins are pretty unique. I mean, he fought for the US in World War II, and tragically he was taken by force to be the next test subject for Project Rebirth. When he was injected with this new serum, it gave him super strength, and in turn, he freed himself and other prisoners and busted out of there. So now he's got quite the power behind those punches, and Ultimate Nick Fury is way cooler than our 616 Nick Fury because he was designed to look like Samuel L. Jackson, so it's really no contest. And before we continue on with this list of Ultimate heroes, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be awesome. It really does help our channel out a lot. I'm not going to waste any more of your time. Let's go right back into this list. Thank you so much. Number 8, Nightcrawler. Kurt Wagner made his Ultimate debut in Ultimate X-Men issue 7. Now his origins here had him growing up in the Weapon X program, and he was trained to become an assassin from the start. He had a pretty dark upbringing, and in turn he would have these bad pockets with the X-Men. Like Warren and Dazzler were a couple, but Kurt also liked Dazzler, so he kidnapped her? Okay. And the team was like, hey, so we're gonna put you in a coma now because that's not cool. We can't really do that. And then he came back and he apologized. The dust was settled, no hard feelings. Okay, sure. He joined Colossus' X-Men team with Dazzler and Angel, by the way, so it was definitely fine. Kurt wasn't all bad. He was actually kind of funny, I mean, as a character, because sometimes he would use the Danger Room with Angel to reenact Pirates of the Caribbean instead of, fighting bad guys. So already this version is my kind of guy. I mean, minus the kidnapping part, of course. Him and Angel were tight because they couldn't hide their mutations, so they ended up being best of friends. So they fought pirates together, chased the same girls, they're living the mutant dream in a way. Not bad. Sadly, Kurt was killed by Magneto's ultimatum wave, and it got a lot of other X-Men killed as well. So it's dark, it's nice, and then it's dark. That's the Ultimates. Number 7, the Hulk. First appearing in Ultimate Marvel Team Up issue 2, he's still big, he's still angry, but this time around he is gray. Okay. Now before this, however, Bruce Banner wanted to be just like Captain America, back before he was the Hulk, back before he was big and strong. So at Cambridge University, he was committed to duplicating the Super Soldier Serum with helps of Nick Fury's Super Soldier blood. So he used it on himself, and honestly, already I'm a fan of Bruce Banner more. I mean, the Hulk hasn't even been created yet, and then Nick Fury, the first Super Soldier, gathered the best genetic engineers to recreate the serum, and Bruce was luckily amongst them. So Bruce actually thought that he figured this thing out, but again, he wanted to be like Cap and he wanted to stay quiet, so he tested this new serum out on himself, and then he ended up becoming Ultimate Hulk. Later on, Bruce decided to make even more serum, so he mixed Super Soldier Serum again with this new Hulk serum, smashed them together, injected himself, so now Super Soldier Nick Fury actually made Banner the Hulk in this timeline. That's a cool sentence right there. Number 6. Deadpool. Meet Wade Wilson. He had a pretty rough go in the Ultimates, as do most of them. I'd say more intense than his 616 counterpart, because in Ultimate Spider-Man, Wilson gets hired by the Ganosian government, but of course in Deadpool's spirit, he gets hired to double down and hunt these mutants, but it's also a TV event. It's fun. And then when Deadpool is going up against Spider-Man, he actually gets unmasked, and his appearance is even more shocking in this reality. Even the host has to apologize to the viewers at home, because his mask, I mean, to begin with, wasn't even really a mask. It's translucent, so not really the best. And then Spider-Man even adds insult to injury, saying that his face smells like a KFC dumpster on a hot day. So if anybody needs redemption, it's definitely Wade Wilson from the Ultimates. Number 5. Iron Man. Making his first appearance in Ultimate Marvel Team-Up issue 4, Ultimate Iron Man has some medical issues as well, but it's much more bizarre this time around. It's not his heart that makes him unique, it's actually his brain. Now, he was born a genius, of course, and he was also one of 2 twin boys, the other being Gregory Stark. Now, Tony originally wanted to start his own business with his current girlfriend, Josie Gardner, but after so much pressure from his father, he decided to join the family business, and Josie ended up leaving Tony because of this. She was like, oh, I thought we had a thing? Okay, see ya. Then 6 months later, Josie tragically passed away in a plane crash. Now, the plane crash was orchestrated by Mandarin International, which was a company that used to work with Howard Stark earlier, but cut ties. Drama. So Howard wanted Tony to put all that pain into work for the company, but Tony was like, you know what, I think nanotechnology is where I'm going to put that energy. So after his father's passing, Tony then had to fully take over the company, but by then he was a troubled celebrity, he was an alcoholic, and things got even harder for Tony when he was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor. So he mixed his biotech with armor and he bought himself some time. Now, Ultimate Tony Stark's tumor was actually an Infinity Stone growing in his brain, so with the nanotech body and everything, it just made him stronger, so much stronger. So this gave Tony the ability to transfer his consciousness between other machines. He's actually friends with his brain tumor in this world. His name is actually Anthony. It's a little boy. It's like a separate living hallucination boy. Totally normal. Number 4. Colossus. Making his first appearance in the 1610 universe with Ultimate X-Men issue 1, Peter Rasputin aka Colossus was discovered during the Cold War. He was attacked by Anatol Spichkin, but when it was confirmed that Peter was indeed a mutant, a deal was made instead. Anatol would keep his secret and he was so ready to give Peter a job, but down the road, if he ever needed one, he had a job for him down the road. Of course, he was a giant guy made of metal. He's like, hey, I got some for you to do, trust me. Roofing, stapling, some hammering, we can find you some things. Peter's father, like most fathers in these comics, was not a pleasant man, so Peter thought, you know what, I could use some of that help now, let's go. And then he went back to Anatol because the thing is, Ultimate Colossus had thick skin, literally he was made of steel, but he wasn't strong enough where it really made a huge difference. I mean, sure, drywall is easier to punch through, but it was heavy. Like, imagine wearing a skin suit of metal. The Tin Man probably had insane calves, but it wasn't until Anatol introduced Peter to this drug called Banshee, and that's where he got the strength behind those metal mitts. So now Colossus, on narcotics, was taking on these jobs, these super strong tourist gigs, and at the age of 19, Peter was picked up from Big Boris, a Russian mafia boss, and then he worked with him for 10 years. So he just joined the mafia for 10 years from 19 to 29. You know, the usual thing you do after you're 19. He kept his powers a secret mostly for those around him, and then one day during a botched arm deal, Peter and his team were shot at. Peter survived because of his thick skin, and his mutant ability was also exposed in a much greater way. He was kind of screwed until Jean Grey found him and then offered him a spot with the X-Men. That's actually where he got the codename Colossus. Now this version is unreal. He's close with Wolverine as they both share, you know, horrible backgrounds. They would walk the streets at night just trying to solve these dark cases, looking for trouble. Imagine these two bumping into you. No chance. In Ultimate War, he took on Thor and Iron Man at the same time for 10 minutes. So, how wild is that? Number 3, Ultimate Red Skull. Making his debut in the Ultimate Comics Avengers 1 back in 2009, Ultimate Red Skull is, I know, a villain, but he wasn't always that way. He's a lot different than the Red Skull that we know from our main continuity. He's actually the son of Steve Rogers in this universe and Gail Richards. They even hid him and trained him to become the next Captain America. The Ultimates are wild. This is the dream scenario. But he always feared that he would never live up to his father's expectations. Now, it's not like he was raised in a bad household, it was kind of the opposite. He was raised to become a superhero. He was raised to fill some rather big boots. He was raised to become the next Captain America after he was declared dead in Iceland. So he kind of had the dream job and he was more powerful than Steve Rogers as well. So what happened? So when we're talking about comebacks, I really think Ultimate Red Skull could have been a treat. Now he was eventually in charge of the military that he grew up with. He figured out now that he was a leader and he used it against them. His personality as well was pretty easygoing, so it wasn't hard to convince anybody what he was doing. But again, he had this mental wall where he could never live up to Father Rogers. So at age 17, he escaped and took out every doctor and soldier on that team. He just wiped everybody out, so evil. And then he used a kitchen knife to really complete the whole Red Skull look. A nice do-it-yourself makeover. Nice and haunting. So he had all the tools to be great, but that pressure of Steve Rogers took him down the wrong path. Interesting. Number 2, Magneto. He made his first appearance in Ultimate X-Men issue 1. Eric Lehnsherr was born to 2 Canadian agents of Weapon X. Now he got his abilities and mastered magnetism at a young age, and his father didn't respond well to that. He was intoxicated most of the time, and he attacked Eric one day, not an ideal living situation for a child. Now he tried to shoot Eric once, but those powers naturally came out, and then Eric pushed the bullet right back. So Eric had to spend his teen years with that guilt weighing down on him. Now eventually he was disgusted with Weapon X, the whole idea of finding a cure for the mutant gene through means of. So he used these abilities, freed Mutant X, Wolverine, who I talked about in part 1 of this list, which you for sure watched. And then Eric married a human woman named Isabel, but he left her once he met Charles Xavier. They didn't fall in love. He was fascinated. This is the first adult mutant that he's ever met, and they share the same ideologies on them. So Eric grabbed these mutant kids from a previous lover and then denied ever loving a human woman. Rough. The Brotherhood relocated to the Savage Land a few years later, and then Eric started referring to the mutants as an army, which is bad news. He was changing, as were his views on this whole mutant operation. He even started going by the name Magneto, and totally abandoned his human name, and then Xavier was no longer on board. I mean, this is supervillain 101. Anybody can see a villain in the making, especially if you can read minds. That sure does help. So Magneto made a helmet that prevented that from ever happening. This helmet prevented psi intrusion into his mind, and it also looked cool. So when Charles took a few loyal followers and made a run for it, Magneto was pretty upset and broke Charles' spine, leaving him in the wheelchair. And finally, number 1, we have Miles Morales. He made his first appearance in Ultimate Fallout issue 4, just a couple months before the death of Peter Parker. Now Norman Osborn was arrested and revealed as the Green Goblin, and then a young thief broke into that empty Osborn industry, and then that's where a genetically enhanced spider found its way into the thief's backpack. Now while Miles Morales was visiting his Uncle Aaron, that spider just happened to crawl out of Uncle Aaron's bag, and then it bit Miles Morales. He of course got these amazing abilities, the Spider-Man abilities, but on top of that he could also turn invisible, which is a pretty sweet gig. That plus Stun Blast makes Miles pretty hard to take down. Now the thing is, what makes him unique is at first Miles didn't really want to be a hero. He wanted to leave that up to the real Spider-Man until his untimely departure, saving his family from Osborn. So Miles got to the scene, but it was too late and too ahead of him. So he felt guilt after this for not being able to save Peter, so he suited up and joined the battle. His first villain was against Kangaroo, and he took him on wearing a Spider-Man Halloween costume, which is a great look. I honestly love Miles. I'm so happy he's in a bigger part of the Spider-Verse that we're currently in, and I'm betting that we meet live-action Miles Morales in the next Spider-Man movie. I think that's the only thing they've managed to keep a secret about that film. I'm calling it now.
Number 10, Green Lantern Malene. While Jo hasn't gone anywhere yet, I'm still loath to lose her. Lantern Malene is the newest Green Lantern to be introduced in the last Young Animals series that we have left, Far Sector. This comic is amazing, by the way, and if you haven't read it, you should. It's written by the amazing science fiction and fantasy writer N.K. Jemisin, with stunning art and colors by Jamal Campbell. Truly a gorgeous and intriguing book. Although Far Sector isn't yet finished, Jo also has yet to make an appearance in, well, any other series. If she does seem to stay within the Far Sector series alone, we need to find a way to get her into some other books. This is a character whose story needs to continue because it's just so good. Admittedly, this is also a creative team I will be sad to see possibly disband. Number 9, Rockslide. So Rockslide just passed away in the comics, with us losing him in the Ten of Swords event, starting off in Creation. We then got to mourn him in X Factor issue 4, which is part 2 of the story in the event. But even though he just left us and we got some closure and grieving in, as well as a weird, twisted replacement version, I already find myself missing Rockslide and wanting him back. He was one of the often referred to as next-gen mutants, and I always felt like Rockslide never really got his fair due when it came to his development and stories. Yet he was such a cool character. Although I know not everyone can be resurrected forever, I hope that the mutants do find a way to bring him back and to fix this whole resurrection issue in the long run. Who else could we possibly be losing in Ten of Swords, never to return? I cannot bear it. Number 8, the Nova Corps in the MCU. Nova Corps didn't even get an on-screen death in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We simply heard of the entire Nova Corps death in passing, which is honestly tragic because if we don't somehow see them return, it means that we'll never get a Nova. Considering that the MCU could be heading in the direction of Young Avengers when it comes to changing up their hero roster in the near future, and perhaps we could even get a Champions team with Ms. Marvel joining the MCU, it would be cool to see the Nova Corps somehow return. maybe at least a few of them survived, this would likely be crucial in order for us to get any of the Novas that we know and love from the comics. Number 7. The Specter. The Specter is a hero slash neutral figure slash sometimes villain that has recently been reduced to supporting roles and pop-up appearances in the comics. In the comics, the Specter is back to being Jim Corrigan, but I also just miss when the Specter was fallen Green Lantern at the time, Hal Jordan. We have recently seen the Specter pop up in the 2019 Justice League in one of the latest arcs, but I honestly would love to see the character get his own solo series again. He hasn't really been focused on in that way since the Hal Jordan days, but he's such a powerful and interesting character. It would be cool to see him become more prominently featured again. Number 6. Heimdall. One of the most underutilized characters in the MCU in my opinion. Heimdall is both an Asgardian and Vanir in the comics, meaning basically that he is descended from the gods. His mother herself was the goddess of the sea. He was appointed as the guardian of the Rainbow Bridge by Odin himself due to his powers of perception. Heimdall has the power to see and hear from a great distance, through space and time. Spidey Sense got nothing on his abilities. In the MCU, we knew Heimdall as the guardian of the bridge as well, but he also perished during Endgame along with all of the surviving Asgardians following the catastrophic events of Ragnarok. However, although he might appear to be gone in the MCU, Idris Elba has been reported as expressing his interest in seeing Heimdall somehow return. Elba knows that Heimdall is essentially part of the God family and as such would be into returning in Love and Thunder. Hopefully, director and co-writer Taika Waititi is also interested.
Coming in at number 5, we have Mr. Bloom, the plant-based villain. With the ability to plant seeds within people that would grant them incredible superpowers but at the cost of their lifespan, Mr. Bloom threw Gotham into chaos during a period where Bruce Wayne was unable to be Batman and Commissioner James Gordon had instead taken up the cape and cowl. The coolest thing about Mr. Bloom wasn't just the unique look of his powers and his visual design, but how they were able to manipulate the people and villains of Gotham into a new status quo so easily. Seeing this villain have a rematch with Bruce Wayne, or even get to interact more with the similarly plant-based Poison Ivy, seems like an obvious choice for a comeback, and I can't wait to see what this villain does next. Coming in at number 4, we have Prometheus. While not an alternate reality version of Bruce Wayne like several other villains on this list, Prometheus is still a dark reflection of the Batman, given that he had to watch his criminal parents be gunned down Bonnie and Clyde style by Gotham City police forces. Waging war against law enforcement and justice of any kind, Prometheus is made all the deadlier with his helmet that allows him to download fighting skills directly into his brain. It's this deadly combo of physical prowess and ideological differences that make Prometheus one of the more interesting Bat villains and someone who definitely needs to be featured more often. Coming in at number 3, we have the iconic Harvey Dent, aka TwoFace. Originally fighting for the side of justice with Bruce Wayne as Gotham's district attorney, Harvey Dent's mind was split in two following an acid attack that scarred exactly one half of his face. Making all of his decisions through a coin flip based on his past childhood trauma, TwoFace is one of the most well-known villains of Batman, but hasn't gotten a chance in recent years to really headline an event as a villain, usually only taking the focus in smaller storylines or as a supporting character. Personally, I think TwoFace is long overdue to take his place as a master of the criminal underworld. Coming in at number 2, we have Bruce Wayne's former childhood friend and current adulthood enemy, Hush. Born under the name of Thomas Elliot, Hush as a child was one of the first people to inspire Bruce on his road to becoming Batman. However, Thomas Elliot was a deranged child, wishing to have his family's fortune for himself and killing both of his parents to have it. After traveling the world and training to become a warrior, Hush adopted his supervillain persona and allied himself with the Riddler to rid the world of Bruce Wayne, organizing many of his enemies and even allies against him. And while the villain has appeared several times since, it's been a while since we've truly gotten to see the master manipulator Hush at work. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the Phantasm, aka Andrea Beaumont. Originally debuting in the animated film Batman: Mask of the Phantasm, Andrea Beaumont was Bruce Wayne's first love, the girl he almost considered abandoning his mission as Batman for before the mission had even begun. Unfortunately for Bruce, Andrea and his relationship was forced to an end by the death of her father, causing Andrea to begin her descent into becoming the vengeful spirit known known as the Phantasm. As a villain with an incredibly cool design and a very personal connection to Batman, the Phantasm has been only recently seen in the comics, and definitely takes my top pick for the villain that most deserves another storyline. Coming in at number 10 as a bit of an honorable mention is the Batman Who Laughs. Now, the reason this villain is only getting an honorable mention is because he's relatively new and has had a huge amount of publicity in the few years since his creation. But I still do think this character deserves some more exploration further down the road. As a twisted combination of Bruce Wayne and the Joker from the Dark Multiverse, the Batman Who Laughs was an incredibly intimidating villain that only got even more powerful when he gained the powers of Dr. Manhattan and became the Darkest Knight. But seeing as how he was then killed by God Mode Wonder Woman, and I do think that the Batman Who Laughs deserves a comeback in the near future so that we can see what really happens when the true Batman and the Batman Who Laughs go head to head. Coming in at number 9, we have Owlman, the evil opposite of Batman from Earth 3. Born under the name of Thomas Wayne Jr., as a young boy, Owlman murdered his younger brother Bruce and had his butler Alfred kill his parents to ensure that the Wayne fortune was not wasted by their frivolous spending. Using his costumed identity as Owlman to intimidate the leaders of Gotham into falling under his control, Owlman was a twisted version of everything that Batman stood for, and every time their universes have crossed over has led to some incredibly dramatic battles. And with the DC Omniverse recently having become a lot more open than it was during the New 52 era, it's only a matter of time before Owlman and Batman are trying to outwit one another once more. Coming in at number 8, we have the malicious psychologist known as Hugo Strange. One of Batman's oldest villains, originally debuting only 9 issues after the Caped Crusader himself in Detective Comics, Professor Hugo Strange was also one of the very first villains to ever figure out his secret identity as Bruce Wayne. While initially depicted as a typical mad scientist stereotype, using a weather machine to hide his minions' robberies with a thick layer of fog, more recent interpretations of the character have seen him as a devious manipulator, using his position of power as a doctor of psychology to examine the criminals of Arkham Asylum and scheming to gain power in Gotham City. It's this emphasis on mental ability rather than actual superpowers that makes Hugo Strange such an interesting villain to deal with, and why he definitely deserves to come back in a major Batman storyline. Coming in at number 7, we have the intelligent zombie, Solomon Grundy. Inspired by a 19th century English nursery rhyme, Solomon Grundy was born centuries ago as a wealthy merchant, but after being murdered and having his body dumped in a swamp with mystical properties, he's now cursed to constantly be resurrected with slightly different properties each time. Usually being depicted as an incredibly physically strong zombie, Grundy is also incredibly resilient to both magic and physical damage, meaning that every time he's faced by either Batman or Superman, they need to figure out a clever new way to defeat him. Solomon Grundy has always been a dependable muscle for other villains throughout the years, but it would be nice to see him take more of a starring role in an upcoming Batman story. Coming in at number 6, we have Catman. Yep, that's not a typo, there's an actual Batman villain named Catman, and we'd love to see more of him in the comics as he continues to walk the fine line between villain and anti-hero. Born under the name Thomas Blake, Catman was initially a famous lion trapper that decided a life of crime was a better use of his peak human abilities, and even based his initial costume on that of the already established villain Catwoman. However, after years of being thwarted by Batman and becoming mocked by other supervillains, Catman reformed himself after some time in the jungle into becoming an anti-hero, and was most recently seen working alongside the Suicide Squad. With all of this character development making him more than just a joke character, Catman definitely deserves to face off against Batman once more.
Number 5, The Question. The Question is a hero who has seen a lot of change since his first introduction in DC Comics. In the time since the character's introduction, we have had Vic Sage, Renee Montoya, an unknown figure, and Charlie Vic Zsasz, who is basically another version of Vic Sage, all take up the mantle. While we appear to mostly be back to Vic Sage as the current Question in the New 52 continuity belonging to Prime Earth, he also has only made a few appearances. He randomly helped Amanda Waller run the Suicide Squad for a bit before reappearing appearing as a villain in that story when he tried to basically take the Suicide Squad from her and turn against Amanda Waller, and made a brief appearance in Heroes in Crisis, but we haven't seen the Question in a solo series as a hero for what feels like forever. Not an ongoing solo series since the Charlie Vic Sage iteration from New Earth, who had a series in 2005. The closest that we've actually got is his Black Label limited series from 2020, which spanned 4 issues. Which is still really good, but you know, it's not an ongoing, it's not a long one. I want more than a limited series. Number 4, Rom the Space Knight. Rom the Space Knight is a character who hasn't been seen in the Marvel Universe since Marvel lost the rights to the character in the 80s. Rom the Space Knight was actually originally a toy that Marvel was leased the rights to by Parker Brothers starting in 1979. In 1986, Marvel lost the rights to the character but managed to hold on to the Space Knights in general. Rom still has comics being made, but the rights to his character are currently owned by IDW Publishing instead. IDW last few series have been limited series featuring the character, the latest being Rom Dire Race, which had to have its 3rd issue delayed due to the global crisis, although we should be seeing that in December. While the comics IDW has been creating recently have been alright, with some superfans falling head over heels in love with them, it would be nice to see Rom return to the level of popularity he once had back in the 80s. In 2015, it was announced that Paramount Pictures / Hasbro Allspark were actually working towards a Rom the Space Knight feature film. In 2018, it was believed that Ready Player One writer Zach Penn was actually working on that script, but lately it's been all quiet on the Rom movie news front. Here's hoping that it eventually comes to fruition and helps to mark a surge in Rom's demand and popularity once again. We want more Rom the Space Knight. Number 3, Ben Reilly. While Ben has made an appearance opposing Conan in the comic series Conan Battle for the Serpent Crown earlier this year in issue number 2, the truth is we haven't seen Ben Reilly doing his own thing for a couple of years. His series Ben Reilly Scarlet Spider ended in 2018, and he made an appearance in Spider-Geddon, but of course, so did a bunch of other Spider folks, because Spider-Verse and Spider-Geddon are kind of all about the Spider people coming together. Ben Reilly is a fan favorite when it comes to alternate Spider-Man, and it would be awesome to see him get his own solo series once more, check in and see what kind of adventures Ben is up to currently. Number 2, Black Widow. In the MCU, we all know Natasha is now dead, but I don't think I'm the only superfan that is hoping we might get a chance to see her somehow come back to life or return. Black Widow has also died in the comics before and returned by the way of Red Room clones, so it's not impossible considering how much the Red Room seems to be featured in her self-titled feature film that she could be returning this way. We have also heard reports that Scarlett Johansson has signed a deal which would see her return to the MCU in some capacity, though just because we heard it from a reliable source doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Even if Yelena Belova, played by Florence Pugh, becomes the new Black Widow in the cinematic universe, which would be awesome, fans of Natasha's are still going to be hoping we see her return. Honestly, there is so much more that could be explored with Nat is what it comes down to. I feel as though the MCU only really just scratched the surface before they killed her off in Endgame, and all because she just didn't have a traditional family really. The fans demand justice. Number 1, Wally West. So while we do have Wally in the comics right now as he's involved in Flash Forward, we kinda lost the Wally West we were hoping to have in the comics due to the events of Heroes in Crisis. When I say we, I guess I should say some. I'm sure not everyone feels this way, but I know that there were quite a few who felt betrayed by the fact that Wally returned to the comics only to be made a temporary villain who was later condemned not just by other heroes but by himself in the aftermath. It's like we just got him back before losing him again. Now he's off trying to redeem himself, but there are many fans who wish that wasn't the case, and that he didn't have to redeem himself at all, as Wally West is known usually for being like the best of the best. Poor Wally West. Thank you so much.
In a 10, Sin Eater. Stanley Carter's parents were addicts who ended up falling in love with each other. Stanley's father though later died, leaving Stanley's mother pregnant and alone. Stanley's mother was sent to a rehabilitation clinic and Stanley went to be raised by his grandparents in the Ozark Mountains. Stanley's grandfather was a zealous pastor who reveled his son and took it out on Stanley. After Stanley's grandfather died due to a rattler bite, this congregation held a sin-eating ritual for him, and young Stanley presumably saw a Sin Eater, a masked hermit who would eat fruit placed in the corpse of someone's body to take the dead sins for himself, because, you know, that's not gonna screw up a child's development. Stan Lee ended up joining the NYPD and became a detective after growing up, having multiple instances of executing criminals, particularly drug traffickers, including his own partner. This is where he really became the Sin Eater, a maniacal serial killer and probably one of Spider-Man's scariest foes with no powers, but with the MO of killing anyone who sins. The Sin Eater's first victim was actually his own lover, police captor Jean DeWolf, whose death attracted attention throughout all New York City, including their friend Spider-Man. The Sin Eater had stolen DeWolf's purse, creating a precedent of taking one personal object for each of his victims, and this object would usually have to be associated with the victim's sin in some way. It's probably gonna be a loose way, but yeah. And 9. Atrocity. Introduced and only seen in the Spider-Man game Spider-Man Edge of Time from 2011, Atrocity was created after Anti-Venom went into a blind rage, accidentally knocked Otto Octavius and Walker Sloan into Walker Sloan's gateway. It was like a time gateway. The three fused in the space-time continuum. I tried getting Taylor to put this on a list for ages, so I'm gonna put it here because holy damn, this is one hell of a villain that I want to see come back. Atrocity would occasionally attack Peter Parker or Miguel O'Hara with its teleporting tentacles throughout their journey in Alchemax's building, until it eventually revealed itself and attacked Peter Parker. Atrocity was defeated but would later appear again, attempting to kill Peter Parker at the same time the CEO was fighting Miguel O'Hara. Peter manipulated Atrocity into attacking electrified pillars, stunning it. Peter took this opportunity to remove those tentacles and send them through the time gateway. These tentacles were also used to drain the Alchemax CEO of his powers. After both Atrocity and the CEO, who is revealed to be Peter Parker, were vulnerable, they were knocked into the gateway together simultaneously, resetting the timeline. This absolute monstrosity is able to teleport through time and space, in addition to all of his other powers. So yeah, Atrocity for sure needs to make a comeback. I want to see this guy. He only appeared once. He's probably one of the most horrifying looking villains of all time. Please. And at 8, Mr. Negative. Martin Lee was a seemingly good-willed philanthropist who ran a volunteer soup kitchen called Feast, where May Parker volunteered, because of course she did. While he was also the crime boss of Chinatown, Mr. Negative. Despite being a crime lord, Lee was seemingly a kind and generous man. The Feast project displayed healing powers for people of various illnesses, although the cause of this healing was actually unknown, but it turned out to be Lee himself. The public knows that the person known as Martin Lee was an illegal Chinese immigrant who attempted to travel to America to be with his wife. In China, he ran a factory, but because of his lack of resources to bribe the Communist Party, he could not develop his business and grew tired of that country. Although this Martin Lee is not actually Martin Lee, but a former smuggler who just used Lee's identity after he died. Mr. Negative first came into conflict with Spider-Man when he made a power play towards taking control of New York's criminal underworld by attempting to wipe out all existing members of the Carnage and Maggia crime families, using a DNA-specific bioweapon called Devil's Breath. Mr. Negative is also responsible for the creation of Anti-Venom, and while he was featured in the 2018 Spider-Man game, it's been like 3 years, so he needs to show up again. And at 7, The Spot. As a scientist working for the Kingpin, Dr. Owen was assigned to reproduce the radiation levels of the Vigilante cloak to find a way to artificially mimic his powers. Working late one night, he actually succeeded, creating a solid black circular portal. In doing so, however, the drain on the city's power became so great a blackout washed over the city, causing the portal to shimmer and destabilize. Fearful of losing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Owen stepped into it, which was a horrible idea. The power shortage caused the portal to send him into a different dimension, a place of half darkness and half light, kinda like my mind. When Owen emerged back in his lab, his body had undergone a radical transformation. The portals from the other dimension had adhered to his skin, covering him from head to toe in black spots. But just think about how crazy OP this villain is, alright? He has the ability to control these portals. If the man wanted to decapitate you, instantly he could. Best doctor in a sense, I guess. That's still horrifying. The Spider-Man in the 90s cartoon would use these portals against Owen, but if he had just decided that he wanted to just destroy him, he could have, and Spider-Man would have had nothing to do. So yeah, I want to see him make an appearance again, somehow. And at 6, Spider-Side. Spider-Side is a more obscure and odd Spider-Man villain, but I still think he would be pretty badass. Being first introduced as Spider-Side in New Warriors number 61, this version of Peter Parker is one of the clones made by Dr. Miles Warren, because we all know how much we love clones, which is an entirely separate villain that caused the whole clone debacle and creation of Scarlet Spider and a whole lot of other things. What's notable about Spider-Side, however, is not only him having all of Spider-Man's powers, but also the ability to stretch and warp his body at will, similar to Mr. Fantastic. Spider-Side is certainly deadly as well, helping Jackal to release a virus in Springfield, Pennsylvania, resulting in the deaths of 2,600 people. But either way, Spider-Side, with all the abilities of Spider-Man and Mr. Fantastic, makes him pretty damn powerful, so I want to see him come back. They didn't do much with him, okay? And I like the name Spider-Side. Any evil Spider-Man, really, just Bring me more.
Number 5, Emma Frost. Emma Frost is one of the most powerful mutant telepaths in the Marvel Universe. Actually, hold that. One of the most powerful telepaths, period, in the Marvel Universe, mutant or not. She has given the likes of Professor Charles Xavier a run for his money and has managed to duke it out psionically with mental heavyweights like Jean Grey. The only reason we are ranking her so low for a villain who possesses powerful mind control abilities is because she's really more of a hero these days. But she did start out as a villain in the comics, and it's important to remember that with Emma. In fact, that's a big part of what makes her such an interesting and compelling character, I think, today. Emma can influence a person's thoughts, manipulate them to do what she wants, and even alter their memories. In her days as a villain, she definitely used her powers to make others do her bidding, even compelling her victims to kill at her behest. Emma as a villain is scary. Emma would be more scary as a villain today, too. I kind of want Emma to be a villain again for a little bit. I just feel like she's a great hero, but she's also a great villain. I don't know. She's just great. The end. Number 4, Zemnu. Zemnu is also known as the Living Hulk and is a being that uses hypnosis powers to take control of others' minds. On more than one occasion, he has attempted to use these powers to conquer Earth and bend the minds of its entire populace to his will. In fact, while he's also attempted this feat in the pages of Immortal Hulk, this was also something he tried in his very first appearance. Back then, he was trying to mind control the human race in order to get them to build him a ship to return him home. Doesn't sound like such an evil plan, until you realize the force of the ship that he'd have the Earth build would actually rip it asunder once it took off and destroy it completely, due to the great force needed for it to launch. Number 3, Maxwell Lord. Maxwell Lord's power set has changed over time, but the fact remains that when it comes to taking control or influencing others in the DC universe, he's pretty much one of the best. He has taken control of the minds of some of the most powerful heroes in DC, such as Superman and Martian Manhunter. And because his powers have fluctuated over his history as a character, so have his power levels, with him at one point being able to extend his telepathic reach to manipulate the minds of billions at a time on Earth. Pretty crazy stuff. In the DCEU in Wonder Woman 1984, Maxwell Lord was a failed businessman who gained the power to grant others wishes, and through that amassed power for himself, besides with said wish granting also being kinda like a monkey's paw that generally came with some kind of catch or negative aspect. However, in the comics, Maxwell Lord doesn't even need an artifact to control the minds of others, which makes him even more deadly. And even if he didn't have like powers, he's still like super charismatic and persuasive, so he could probably just convince you to do what he wants you to do just by like being all smooth and charming. Number 2, Onslaught. Onslaught is one of the most powerful telepathic and telekinetic minds we've ever seen our Marvel heroes face. At one point, he threatened the existence of most of the superpowered heroic community in Marvel and seemingly killed a lot of them, and that was because he was basically threatening the entire world. Fortunately, they were rescued by young Franklin Richards and his reality warping powers. Onslaught is an entity created out of the combined minds of Professor Charles Xavier and Magneto that was created when Xavier broke Magneto's mind, seemingly wiping it but actually taking part of it into himself. Merging with his own suppressed dark emotions, Onslaught was created. While Onslaught is most powerful in many ways, the entity can also implant ideas in the minds of even the strongest telepaths, encouraging them to do his bidding as he sees fit, though generally he seems to prefer to strong-arm people for the most part when push comes to shove. He has like a lot of like psychic abilities, but I feel like he's also just like telekinetically like, I'll just punch you into outer space. Number 1, Staro the Conqueror. Staro can literally conquer entire worlds and actually has done that before. And on more than one occasion, they have also almost conquered Earth as well. Staro is a giant space starfish who in their first appearance took on the first formation of the Justice League in The Brave and the Bold issue number 28, where they threatened to, you guessed it, conquer the world. While in the Suicide Squad film, Staro the Conqueror was a cruel nickname given to Staro by the Thinker, who is in charge of the experimentation on that imprisoned alien, that poor imprisoned alien. In the comics, it was a name earned by Staro because they had conquered so many worlds already. Staro basically creates lots of smaller starfish babies or spores, which can then latch onto individuals and take over their minds. In the Suicide Squad, this is made even more horrifying as to be controlled by a Staro baby baby also means that you are now dead and basically just a husk. But in the comics, possibly even more terrifying still than that prospect is the revelation that Staro doesn't need to get one of their babies on you to control you. They can also do that through infecting your subconscious, or in more recent incarnations, just with their willpower. No babies or spores needed. Although fortunately in the comics, if a baby or a spore attaches to you, doesn't mean you're dead. You can still come back. Number 10, Crime Lord. He might not be one of the most powerful on this list, but I've been really loving the Doom Patrol series so far. I have to get caught up on season 3 personally, but wow, did that series get me super invested in this team. At one point, one of the enemies they face is former teammate Mento, aka Steve Dayton in the show. In the show, we learned that Steve Dayton and Rita Farr, who some might know in the comics as Elastigirl, used to date. In fact, in the comics, Steve and Rita were even married. Just like in the show where Mento appears to be both ally and misguided enemy to the team, in the comics, Dayton was also a criminal at one point, becoming the villain known as Crime Lord. His plan in the comics involved framing Deathstroke for murder and placing nuclear bombs the world over, threatening pretty much the entire Earth, cause nuclear bombs. In the end, he was defeated and would become a hero once more. Mento gets his powers from his Mento helmet, which increases the strength of his otherwise low-level psionic abilities. With his helmet, he becomes both telepathic and telekinetic, can fly, and can even control the minds of others. Number 9, Gorilla Grodd. One of Gorilla Grodd's main powers was his force of mind. He was able to use his mind to manipulate the thoughts and senses of others, and he could also use it to take control of people and bend them to his will, or even take their form for himself. Being that Gorilla Grodd is also quite intelligent, he has also found ways to even influence others into adoring him. Back in the New Earth continuity, Grodd once devised a plan to win the heart of the gorilla lady that he loved by making his body emanate a neo-magnetic force that made him instantly liked by those who made his acquaintance, gorilla or human. He succeeded in wooing his lady love, and later would use the same acquired power to influence the people of Central City, almost becoming governor and plotting to use his influence to become the president of the United States thereafter, if he succeeded. Of course, Flash ended up figuring out what was going on and foiled Grodd's plans before they could bear fruit. So no President Grodd for us. Sad. I want to see that plan come to fruition. Unless that's already happened and I somehow missed it, but I don't think so. Number 8, Annihilation. Annihilation is the entity that is believed to be a demonic god. It rules over the Amenthi demon army and is typically attracted to those who are strong enough to defeat it, or defeat its current host, at least. Whoever beats Annihilation must then take its golden helm up for themselves. Wearing the golden helm of Annihilation basically gives you control over the Amenthi army, somewhat, but at the expense of ruling over yourself fully, as it bends you to its will. This is how Annihilation tricked and gained control of Genesis, Apocalypse's wife, who ruled over Arakko and its mutants. She managed to beat Annihilation in battle, only to realize too late that the fight had kind of been a trick. She became the new Annihilation and was forced to merge together the forces of Amenth and of Arakko, becoming the new leader of both groups. Refusing to do so would have meant the Amenthi demons would have been left to run wild, as they would have no guide and no leader, and would then have certainly destroyed the mutants of Arakko otherwise. So Genesis was in a hard place. She was like, I guess I kind of got to do it to save my people, but also then I'm going to kind of lose myself because I'm going to become Annihilation. Dang. Number 7, Brother Blood. Brother Blood is a pretty terrifying villain, to be honest. His mind control comes from accessing his victim's blood, and through getting their blood, there is a whole slew of powers he can exert over you. Brother Blood in the current continuity can use the blood of his enemies to heal, rip open teleportation portals, and even project energy. Oh, and he also gains the powers of those whose blood he has tasted. And of course, once he has your blood, he can also use it to control you, bending you to his will and making you do his bidding. Not only does that mean you're in danger of losing your own free will if you go up against him, but it also means that you have to deal with all of his servants who have already kind of surrendered and are puppeted by him. He also happens to be a weirdly likable guy, so it's pretty easy for him to attract even willing followers who he can then use much more easily as pawns for his own evil plots. And they're all like, yes, we like the blood, the Church of Blood. Number 6, Purple Man. Although Purple Man sometimes can be seen as having a bit of a weakness when it comes to his power set or when it comes to just certain people he comes up against, Kilgrave is still pretty off the charts when it comes to all that he has achieved and is capable of. He can easily influence his opponents to do whatever he wishes simply by suggesting them to do it. However, it's also been implied that his powers can only work when his target can actually audibly hear his command. Now, if this were true, that would make him weaker. But in reality, in the comics anyways, Kilgrave's powers are actually pheromone based, which means he simply has to be in the vicinity for you to become a helpless victim of his. And if you couldn't hear him, you'd probably still do what he wanted you to do. In the Jessica Jones Netflix series, David Tennant played Kilgrave, and that show really showed just how much of a monster and a powerhouse this villain can be. At one point, Dr. Doom even managed to use Kilgrave's power to rule the world. And at another point in time, in another reality, I guess I should say, Purple Man actually does rule the world. And that's what actually comes about creating the 1602 universe, because he tries to get rid of the people that would basically rise up against him, putting them in 1602, and then everything gets wonky there. And Purple Man alone is apparently capable of controlling over 100 people at a time by himself. So yeah, that's a lot.
Halfway through into number 5, Red Goblin. After the collapse of S.H.I.E.L.D., the Carnage symbiote was secured in the Lockbox, a privately run vault at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Agents Crane and Coleman infiltrated the Lockbox and stole the symbiote, delivering it to their employer, Norman Osborn. Yeah, you see where this is going. After receiving the symbiote, Osborn bonded with it to become the new Carnage, hoping that it would be the key to regaining his Green Goblin persona. While the symbiote initially seized control of him, Norman offered to teach it more nuanced and sadistic ways to kill, an offer that the symbiote eagerly accepted. The fact that you know more sadistic ways to kill people than a freaking mad symbiote is a whole other topic though, dude. The symbiote turned over control to its new host, restoring his appearance and purging his body of the nanites, preventing him from augmenting himself with Goblin formula. Osborn used the symbiote to kill Phil Urich, and after pretending to be mortally wounded in a rematch against Spider-Man as the Green Goblin, unveiled his new partner by transforming into the monstrous Red Goblin. Osborn used the symbiote to great effect, incapacitating Spider-Man's allies and loved ones, and bonding a portion of the symbiote to his grandson to turn him into the new Goblin child. Spidey was only able to defeat Red Goblin by taunting Osborn, saying that killing him would only give Carnage the credit and not him, which caused Osborn to remove the symbiote from himself. So he couldn't defeat Red Goblin, he had to defeat Osborn. Yeah, this is one of my favorite Carnage versions, so I want to see this come back, please. Like the next Venom movie. Or a No Way Home. In at number 4, Demo Goblin. After losing fights with Spider-Man and the Green Goblin, Jason Philip Macendale Jr., aka Hobgoblin, took advantage of the Inferno Crisis by following several demons back to their lair and confronting their demonic lord Natshir. Macendale wanted enough power to defeat his enemies, and offered his soul to the demon in exchange for such power. When the demon stopped laughing, he decided that Macendale's effort was worth something even if his soul wasn't, and he had him possessed. This gave Macendale the physical strength that he craved, coupled with superhuman speed and endurance. Unfortunately, I guess you could say for him at least, the demon who possessed him proved to be incompatible, and the two fought many a battle for control over Macendale's physical form until the demon literally ripped himself out of his human host and began a separate existence as the Demogoblin, a form of anti-hero in a sense who would kill anyone who has sinned, which is basically everyone. Except he would stay away from children, even dying to protect one. Getting close to the end in at number 3, Shocker. Okay, he's not really a forgotten villain, but Herman Schultz's parents died when his younger brother Marty was a boy. From a young age, Schultz turned to a life of crime, and soon realized that he wasn't really good at it, having been arrested several times. After one particular robbery gone wrong, Herman was arrested again, but was sent to the prison workshop, where he used the resources around him to build projects and build gauntlets that sent out shock waves which quickly opened safes as well, giving him a much needed one-up on the authorities. Now, I know what you're thinking, okay? Why am I talking about Shocker? Everyone knows who he is. Well, have you seen the MCU version of this guy? Okay, we need a better one. Come on, give me an actual Shocker. Shocker has the ability to shock his enemies with his handheld vibro shock units, but because the vibrations were so fierce, he has to wear a heavily insulated suit, which kind of looks like a mattress, but still. During his first outing as the self-styled Shocker, he ran into and defeated Spider-Man. Plus, I mean, he's He's the shocker, I shock people. Give me a better version, okay? With a seemingly minute introduction into the MCU, I want to see a better version. Do it! Penultimately, in at number 2, The Swarm. Fritz von Meyer was once a fascist scientist, the details of which remain unrevealed. But von Meyer fled Germany at the end of World War II to settle in South America. A work expert on toxic poisons and apiculture, which is beekeeping, he continued his research on the breeding patterns of killer bees. One day, he found a hive unlike any other he had ever seen. The bees exhibited no fear and were unusually passive, and seemed to have a highly developed sense of intelligence. Believing that a nearby meteorite bombardment had somehow mutated these bees, von Meyer built a device that he hoped would reawaken the bees' killer instincts so that they could serve him. However, when they were no longer passive, they began to swarm all over von Meyer, killing him. In the midst of his death, though, his consciousness was shredded, dissipating into the swarms of bees. Thus, von Meyer became an aggregate being, like a living embodiment of the swarm. Kind of like Spider's Man, but with bees. This is probably one of the weirdest but most fascinating villains I've ever seen, and certainly deserves a comeback. However, not as much as number 1, but I gotta admit, being named Fritz and then having your agony possess a whole load of bees, that's getting too close to FNAF for me, okay? I don't like it. Finally, in at number 1, Spider Carnage. We all knew this was going to be on the list, at least if you know me and my favorite Spider-Man villains. However, Spider Carnage isn't just a Spider-Man villain, he's an alternate version of Spider-Man. Hailing from one of the many Earths, this character was introduced in the 90s Spider-Man animated series, my favorite Spider-Man animated series, might I add. This Peter's life was actually very similar to the main Spider-Man, except this version also lost Aunt May and developed a resentment for humanity. And then he had to deal with a clone, which definitely sucked. Until he and the clone learned that the one who they thought was the clone, who was going by Ben Reilly at the time, could actually be the real Peter Parker, and that broke this Peter. A Carnage symbiote from another universe actually sensed this hatred and resentment, and through a portal created by Jonathan Ohm, it bonded with this Peter, driving him even more insane, and then started calling himself Spider Carnage. From my understanding, this character hasn't been seen since that final episode of the series, and I want him to make a comeback. Please, add this character to the MCU. Like, if we're getting 3 Spider-Man, why not just throw Carnage from some other universe in there too, and then have him bond with like Toby's, because apparently Toby's a bad person now. Even though I'm dressed like the Spider-Man 3 version, yes, that's exactly why I wore this suit today. Specifically for that reason, but yeah.